Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're back for part two of the offense against the Commanders. Joining me again, Vas Larikos. Vas, how you doing?
Doing great, Ken. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to discussing some of these ascending young offensive playmakers.
Yeah, lots certainly to talk about. Interesting game against the Commanders. If you haven't downloaded part one, please go back and do that. A lot of good information there about what the streak kind of meant to us and what sacrifices might have been being made, about the deployment order, about the depth in the running back room and how the Ravens may address that in terms of what's going on. But still much more to be decided. The offensive side of the ball, as we talk about the individual talent, some very exciting performances we're going to get to in this episode. So let's jump right into that, Vas. And I'll tell you what, we'll start with the quarterbacks. You're the guest. Pick a quarterback, make your comments on him. I'll respond, and then I'll pick the next.
I'll take Brown. And I thought Brown had a pretty good game. He looked pretty sharp, looked pretty comfortable in the offense, had a nice scramble on one play to pick up a first down. And his touchdown pass to Vokalek, the second touchdown, I thought was a really nice accurate throw.
Yeah, really, I agree with that. The second one is the one between the three defenders,
Right.
Back of the end zone. If you go back to the 2004 game at the New York Jets, that was the game they had the big comeback. Ed Reed had the interception return that got called back from being a touchdown, but was still 78 yards or something, and they ended up with a 20-17 overtime win. But the big player in that game was Clarence Moore, with a pattern that they referred to as zipper. And what zipper meant is you go between the two seams, the two, those zippers that are parted on the field, and high up in the back of the end zone to a tall receiver where there was really no defense against it. And they ran it twice successfully in that game, despite the fact that in between, Clarence Moore had kind of let the team down with a bad alligator arms play on a critical play. That play was zipper. Effectively, there was three defenders, and it still was pretty much difficult to defend because of the height of Vokalek and his ability to get up for that football. It's nice to have a weapon like that.
Absolutely. That's right where you put it, where the receiver can make a play and the defensive backs can't. You see a lot of touchdowns every week around the league in that similar area.
Mm-hmm. Anquan Bolden, the couple touchdowns against the Patriots in the AFC Championship game, of a similar kind of a vein, not exactly the same off the line of scrimmage, but still, getting the ball up high between the goalposts is a tried and true variety, that's for sure. I wanted to talk about Anthony Brown because I think it was primarily the offense that caused the streak to end, basically. I think that they were not very aggressive at all with the football, and they had some awareness issues that were very significant in the final minutes. And specifically, you mentioned the run by Brown, which went for 24 yards times the end of the game. Good run, good to get free, good to make use of space. He has got to get down in bounds on that play. He has to do it. And it's a preseason game. It doesn't matter. Blah 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 blah. It does matter. It matters that you know how to play football right to try and win a football game, whether or not you. Get a 20 or 24 yard run, that actually doesn't matter. Right. What mattered there was the getting down in bounds, and that upset me. And then the next play, Wright did the same thing on a little play to the left. He couldn't stop himself from being carried out of bounds, and he wanted to stay in bounds. He knew it was the correct thing to stay in bounds. He just couldn't do it, and he strayed too far towards the sideline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair points all around. You definitely, doesn't matter if it's preseason. You play football the right way all the time. That's how you remember to do it in the regular season.
Yeah. Now Brown had the pick to end the game, which honestly that's a throwaway pick. No, but otherwise had a clean slate for the game in terms of not throwing an interception. He did lead them on the one drive at the beginning of Q3 for the touchdown to
Vokalek.
Yeah, that was the touchdown to Vokalek. So he threw two to Vokalek. He threw that and the 2 drives later to Vokalek. So, a couple impressive plays. The first one, Vokalek was impressive in terms of getting into the end zone, but it was still a nice connection from Brown.
Yep. No, I thought he looked sharp on that whole entire drive, and it was the next. Well, so they scored on all 3 drives, right? Or no, they scored a touchdown on the first drive. The second drive, they punted, then the touchdown, and then the end of the game.
punt interception at the end of the game. Yeah, it was the punt interception time, and in particular that last drive where they got the ball with 4:08 to play. You got to be able to either take a minute and a half, take 2 minutes off the clock, get it down to the 2-minute warning, or you got to be able to exhaust their timeouts. And hopefully you do that and you get a first down, and then all of a sudden you're in great shape. And at the bare minimum, they should have used some more clock, and honestly probably would have made the difference in the game the way it came down. You'd had a shorter amount of time, fewer plays for the offense to get in field goal position. So anyway, was what it was. We're not going to get too caught up in that, but let's move on. Talk a little bit about Tyler Huntley. Sorry, not Tyler Huntley. About Josh Johnson, who I thought looked really good. The ball was largely on target. Had a really good zip for most of the game. Still has good velocity, good arm strength, and I've been noticing that in camp as well. That he definitely delivers on meaningful velocity there. And the interception that he had was 100% on Prochet. I think we talked about that in the first episode, but it went right through Prochet. Prochet has had a black cat camp right now. It's there. He's got a army of the night of black cats surrounding him in terms of his fortune.
Yeah, feel bad for the guy. Just doesn't look like he's an NFL caliber receiver, unfortunately. Back to Johnson, I thought he looked very sharp, especially the first drive. The script that Monken had, executed it to perfection as the orchestrator. There's only a few incompletions. One was a pretty clear drop. I thought he did a nice job of allowing his receivers to go up and make some contested catches where it was safe for them to do so. Kolar in particular. Also thought he does well to he's pretty accurate on like the short passes, the swing passes, that sort of thing. But he just seemed cool and calm and collected and in full command. It was a great show. You can't really ask for anything more.
Yeah, and he was the one at the end of the first half. Now the back shoulder to Wallace, yes, that was the end of the first half. That was him.
Yeah.
Throwing that. And I have just loved seeing the accuracy on that pass. It seems like it's been missing from the offense, and it is a timing play.
Mm-hmm.
I would not say that Lamar Jackson cannot learn to do timing plays. I'm just saying Lamar Jackson has a lot of distractions in being an improviser at quarterback that make timing throws a departure from normal behavior potentially. So Joe Flacco and Derek Mason, they had great timing. Flacco had fantastic velocity in terms of getting that ball to the outside, and Mason didn't have the problem with catching a high velocity ball out there, and still had enough in the tank to threaten the deep route, which made those comebacks and hitches so effective. I would love to see that return to the offense. I think Zay Flowers is a perfect candidate to do it. I think Bateman can run all of those routes, so I think they have the guys to do it. I just think that it becomes a bigger challenge when the quarterback is not as focused on exact tick-tock timing in his head playing out.
Yeah, that's the give and the take with Lamar's skill set. Notably, there was another play in the second half where Brown targeted Demas on a back shoulder throw, and he left it short, and it was incomplete. So that Johnson looked good, especially on that Wallace touchdown. All
right. Let's move over to the running back room then. We got a complex set. We talked a little bit in that first episode, just to scratch the surface in terms of the players in this game. So we're going to overlap a little bit with that, but some difficulty in determining how you cut down this group. Who do you want to start with?
I think Justice Hill is a roster lock. He has shown some explosiveness that he's showed sporadically throughout his career, but not consistently, and it seems to be more consistent. He also brings a lot to the table on special teams. So, he really was he was the engine on that first drive to get them down the field. Mitchell has been outstanding for what he's been asked to do. And I think Gordon is the odd man out. And
let me go back to Hill for a second. I kind of want to do this one at a time, if you don't
I'm
mind.
sorry.
But yeah, so we agree completely on Hill, and I love the Ravens' speed and space and the ability to use that. Really nice to see an edge that is something that you can race around. Because in the Lamar, that's been one of the problems is that the edge has usually been very difficult to get to with Lamar Jackson at quarterback, because there is a lot of understanding that Roman's offense was very horizontal in terms of creating space along the line of scrimmage for Lamar to penetrate at a given point. And what that meant is that they're looking to contain Lamar and the speed guys at all the exits. And so the line of scrimmage is much more covered. And it's nice to see that the new change in weapons actually forces that to be more of an issue for opposing defensive coordinators. Now, it's easy to say that in a preseason game. Second-tier players also who are having trouble with their tackling anyway at the NFL level could be a part of it, and their angles in particular with regard to Hill.
Yeah, but we have seen it in the regular season as well, where he can create his own angles sometimes. So I'm optimistic on Hill. I like him as a multi-year contributor for this team looking forward.
I like the fact that the Hill run, I believe, was to the short side of the field as well, that he found the edge, and that's hard to do. Harder to do anyway, because that middle strip is, I forget how many yards wide, might be about 8 yards wide in the middle of a 53 and a third, yeah. Yard wide field, and so you have less space to work with on that side. But that was a good play. Let's see, you picked Hill, right?
Yes.
I'll talk about Mitchell, who I think I really love as a player. There's some similarities to Hill. If Mitchell is to be as valuable to this team, he has to do one of a couple of things better than Hill. He has to be a better burst guy to the outside, which he can be, I think. He certainly has the speed right now. Or he has to be a more dangerous receiver after he gets the ball in his hands, because he's got certain deficiencies he'll never catch up. And one is he doesn't really contribute anything on kick coverage or punt coverage in the way Hill does. Another thing is that he's not really a guy you naturally trust on third down, because he doesn't have the size to be a decent NFL pass blocker. So he either has to be an unbelievable on the receiving side, or he has to confine his play and effectiveness on a per snap basis to those early downs.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the speed to the edge is something that Hill might be an A level and Mitchell's A plus. So it is pretty rare to see him bend that edge and so consistently as we've seen throughout camp and the preseason.
Yeah, been exciting, honestly, both places to see him put on a little burst. And this is one of the things you don't really get at camp. And if you've been out there for days, I know you have, Voss, that you don't get a good understanding of what the running backs look like from camp. Right. First of all, they run out every play, even after the whistle. So they're always running for a touchdown. So you don't get any sense from that. So you really got to figure out, where is their burst? Are they hitting a hole right? Was it really the offensive line that made the hole? Then they have run drills and they have pass drills. So the defense is kind of queued up in terms of when they're getting run plays to look at most of the time. So they know they can kind of play for that, which creates additional problems for the running backs. I am consistently frustrated with my ability to analyze running backs in camp, as opposed
100%.
to
100% agree with that. You really learn almost nothing about running backs in camp.
But he certainly has looked great in the preseason, and no problem at all with the 35-yard run that got called back. It was a great run in his own right, and he's looked electric, and the Ravens have to find a way to keep him.
Agreed. They'd be foolish to let him go at this point, especially with the long-term concerns, not concerns, but the top two guys are coming up on free agency. So
yeah, great point. I mean, you don't play this game for just 1 year. These aren't APA cards that you get to torch or toss into a fire at the end of the year. These are, not that anybody hopefully would do that with their game, but these guys are going to be around for future years. And Mitchell, in some ways, is the Ravens' most important back. He's the only one. Well, that's not true. Hill is signed for 2024. And Mitchell is available to or is signed, actually. He's available to the Ravens, because he'll be an ERFA for the next 3 seasons under some terms. But Gus and JK may both be moving on. And it's possible they can re-sign one of them. I'd say, let's hear your percentages on that. How would you handicap it?
Should they or will
0, 1, or 2? If it's 0, 1, or 2 of Edwards and JK, what would you expect percentage-wise? Okay, I'm gonna have to
I
write
will
this down.
say,
Okay, I got mine.
let's go 40% 0,
Okay.
55% 1, 5% 2.
Yeah, we're almost the same. And this is two GMs looking at it together. I said 50, 45, and 5 for 0, 1, and 2. So very, very similar. If they do re-sign somebody, I think it might be Edwards, or it might be a deal with Dobbins. It seems like Edwards is the more reasonable one given the relative cost. I think that you'd have to pay, but he may have suitors, and depending on the kind of year he has.
I just can't imagine a better place to save cap space when you're paying a franchise quarterback than running back. You can grab a guy in the third round to round out the group with Hill and Mitchell next year, and still be a top 5 rushing offense in the league.
And not to stick that thorn in Androcles' paw anymore, but actually Androcles is the human, right? So in the Lions' paw anymore. But what about saving money at inside linebacker?
Yes, those are the two places. Those are, to me, I've softened my stance on the premium positions to some extent over the last few years, but I do still think that the most efficient way to build a roster is to go cheap at the two most replaceable positions on the roster, which are running back and linebacker, for a lot of different reasons. But the way the Eagles kind of construct their roster, I think that's pretty much the way to do it.
It's interesting because the Eagles right now had Miles Jack retire on them unexpectedly. They have a high surplus of cornerbacks. They can't even keep them all, but they've got quality as well at the position. And the Ravens have a inside linebacker depth that is one of the only places that they can truly draw from. It's if they traded Queen, it would be a downgrade in terms of the position for 2023, no doubt about it. But on the other hand, the 2023 ain't the only year you're concerned about. And the Ravens' drop-off at cornerback is a lot worse than their drop-off at inside linebacker.
Sure. But I'm not sure if Philly would be interested in doing that, because I actually watched a little bit of the preseason game last week, and their mid-round linebackers they've picked in recent years are playing well, showing out. And they have that big defensive line in front of them, and I think they'd rather save the cap space and put it somewhere else based on the way they draft and the way they pay.
Yeah, I mean, that's very reasonable as a reaction to that. I think that Patrick Queen honestly would do extremely well with Philadelphia with having huge defensive linemen in front of him. I think that would really work very well for him. Maybe almost as well as having Roquan next to him, which works extremely well. But I think that is certainly a possibility. The trade I've been pimping is Queen for Kelly Ringo.
Yeah, I liked Ringo. We did this. We were live on their show when they made the Simpson pick, when Ringo was on the board, and I was not a happy camper at that point. And unfortunately, we'll see what happens. But sometimes I think you got to say, BPA be damned. We need a corner. We got to take a corner here, especially when the guy had a top 50 grade or top 60 grade going into the draft. But we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. It is what it is. We are now there. Other running backs in this game you want to talk about? You want to talk about Gordon at all, or Ricard?
Ricard, I thought, played well. He really did some nice blocking as always. He had that drag route that he picked up, caught the ball, took it for a first down. I thought Mason actually blocked pretty well too late in the game. A little bit of I form lead blocking as well as springing on an off tackle run. So I thought both the fullbacks played well.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the way Mason played. He's had a very hard time hanging on to the ball in camp. Catching the football is just as hands of freaking stone as far as doing that. So that's been a general problem. But yeah, he's a solid blocker. I thought what was interesting about this game, and they had Mason, so it's not like they didn't have any way to address the problem I'm going to talk about, but they played Ricard only for the first 3 series. So they're still giving him that starter treatment, even though this might have been a game where you want him later as well to help you pound out the game. But it looks to me from this game, from how well Ricard blocked, that he is probably now safe from being cut this year. There was a little bit of cap savings from cutting him this year. There's a lot more next year in terms of what is, but I think it's still $1.75 million maybe this year to cut him. So small incentive if Monken really doesn't want him in the offense.
Yeah, a couple million here or there. I think this is his last year either way because that cap hit does balloon next year, and they've got a lot of void money next year on the books already. So it's really a one-year decision. Does Ricard give you more than somebody else would? I do think that I think he's a valuable player when you're, leading in the fourth quarter and want to put the other team away and salt away the clock. As you said, if he played the last fourth quarter of this game, the streak might still be intact probably. With some of those plays you were mentioning with guys not being able to stay in bounce and that sort of thing. So, I don't feel a strong way about it. It's just let's frame it as is the difference in Ricard for 2013 worth more than the cap savings? That's really the question.
Right. And any player you take out of there, and Ricard would be this situation would exist too. If you show, say, a cap savings of $1.75 million, I think it is, if you go out to OTC, you're going to have to use between $750,000 of that and $1 million to pay the player who replaces him on the roster. So you only get a portion of that savings. You don't get all of it. So you got to think about, who are they going to instead pay to play in that other spot?
Yeah, it'd only be if you saw a long-term future for Vokalek, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be one reason. I think if I don't know how this would play out, but if Monken were to really, he could die on this hill if he did, frankly, if he were to put a stake in the ground and say, look, I don't want Ricard in this offense no matter what. I'm not going to make use of him. So if you can play him at guard, great. If you can play him on the defensive line, great. But I'm not playing him on offense. If he made some statement like that saying, he's absolutely the antithesis of how I want to run an offense. And I think probably Harbaugh would and EDC would consider cutting him, probably try to trade him first, but cutting him.
Yeah, behind closed doors, when your OC puts his foot down and your head coach puts his foot down the other way, or what type of the brand, what style they want to be, I think really the most likely scenario here is he might take a little bit of a haircut to stay on the team this year, maybe give back $1 million in incentives, playing time incentives or something along those lines. We've seen that in years past with, I think Brandon Williams took a little haircut towards the end of his contract. We've seen that with a few guys. So the way it's kind of shaken out, it does remind me of some of those other guys where they went to and said, hey, we gave you this contract. We're going a little bit different direction. We still want to keep you around, but help us out a little bit and give us a little cap savings back.
Conceivable. I don't know if that would fly. I don't know how great a market there is for Ricard outside of this building, but it seems to me when he's only making I think it's $2.75 million this year, but let me look at the thing here. Patrick Ricard makes is a $4 million base salary. Sorry, that's 2024. I'm looking at $2.75 million base and a $1.75 million cap savings. So if they said we're looking to go the other way, could you get them to decrease by $500,000? Maybe, but you got to think there's another team out there. If I'm the Cleveland Browns, I'd love to take Patrick Ricard away from the Ravens, and they have a huge war chest built up, presumably to look to hunt for Aaron Donald at midseason.
I saw that they're moving money around with no apparent. That would make a lot of sense. Donald would fit in that, drop in that defense perfectly. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But, I think this is probably the end of the line for Pat this year. But I do think he's going to be on the team to start the season.
All right. Well, let's move on to that tight end position. Who do you want to talk about first?
Let's do Charlie Kolar.
Okay.
Started off the game with a pretty bad drop. And then made a really strong contested catch. And then later on in the second quarter, a really nice concentration grab in traffic. So I thought he showed good hands. I wasn't overly enthusiastic about his blocking per se, but I think he is a pretty competent tight end 3 at this point.
Yeah, I've been fairly impressed with what he's been able to do from a blocking perspective, so I'm okay with that. But the it's weird that the easiest catch of the night, which still was kind of contested, there's a hand reaching across his body. It's actually difficult to show that it's a drop as opposed to, somebody's hacking at his arm exactly as he's receiving the ball, but it probably was a drop, and it was a little flat route or whatever it was, just a couple of yards past the line of scrimmage at most. And so that didn't look great. But then the two balls he caught are about as tough as contested catches was. And the first one, he went up and kind of went into the fetal position around the football at the catch point, which I love to see. That's a very, very good way to safely body the ball. And then came down with it, no problem. And it might have been a couple of yards after the catch, but it wasn't much. And then the second one, he took a big hit after the catch that dislodges the ball from a lot of players. And that was very impressive for him to hang on to that one. And both big fan throws.
Yeah, we're going to see how much action he sees in the regular season. There's only one ball and a lot of mouths to feed now. But as far as a third tight end that's still developing after missing most of last year, I think you have to be pretty pleased with where he is right now.
So you mentioned Vokalek in terms of a guy who could replace Ricard. What's your feeling about having some of Ricard's duties, if he were not here or if he were injured, either one, having Kolar replace him as their backfield guy?
I think that would be the natural replacement, the first replacement. Looking at it, even just coming into camp, those were, if you were going to jettison Ricard, Kolar was probably going to be the guy to take those inline reps. I don't know. I mean, Vokalek, he's just kind of that training camp darling at this point right now. So just worth talking about after a 2-touchdown game.
Yeah. All right. You pick Kolar. I'll take Vokalek a little bit. Targeted an awful lot in this preseason and in camp and in the games, obviously. Showed really good hands, shown some vertical presence in that first game by getting over the top and having a nice ball dropped into him. That was really nice. And then the yards after the catch he put on display on the first touchdown, which I thought was really good. That was not a low traffic throw, so it was a pretty good throw. It wasn't a particularly great catch, but he secured it. And then the really nice thing was his play after the catch, where getting to the end zone and making sure that he imposed his larger size on the smaller players that were around at that time. And then the going up high for the football, tremendously valuable asset that the Ravens have not used in the end zone as much during the Lamar era because they've gotten away from a lot of the fades. And when they do go to the middle field, it's usually been Andrews, and he's actually a little bit smaller than Vokalek.
Yeah, I thought the first touchdown, the way he just dropped his head and bulldozed right through two guys right at the goal line, it was beautiful. Yeah, I mean, good hands. How do you project his blocking? I mean, would you think he'd be a plus blocker? Is he like an Eric Tomlinson level blocker, or do you think he still has some work to do there?
He has the frame to be an exceptional NFL blocker. So I'd say, it's probably a project to get him there. I think he did a fair amount of blocking at Nebraska. I don't think he was a pure inline guy, but I got to say my view of him was ancillary because I really didn't have him on the draftable list of players. And he's a UDFA, isn't he? Yeah, he's UDFA.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
So it's not completely unexpected that would be the case, but he has the frame. And I think we've seen not only some good blocking, but some attempt to use him as a blocker by lining him up in the backfield so far. And we may have seen it in a game, but we've definitely seen it in camp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they have some options there. If they were to go that direction, they could also potentially use a sixth offensive lineman like they had in previous years for those 4-minute drill in the fourth quarter. We want to put your team away type of scripts, whether that be a Faalele or a Cleveland or one of
both
or Salah or both, and Salah too. Put them all in there.
I think about running QB power with those three guys added to your offensive line. Oh, hi, we're all tight ends. It's sometimes movie scenes like relate, are good analogies for this, but what that would be is like the starting lineup for the opposing team coming out in the final scenes of the movie Slapshot. you remember
I haven't seen that one?
Oh, I haven't seen it. It's a great movie. You definitely
Okay.
want to take the time, but it's a Paul Newman movie, probably from about 1980, where he is the coach of a minor league hockey team that is about to be go out of business, and so all the players are going to be either traded, released, whatever, and they've got one star player who wants to play the game straight up, and Newman, the fans, and the announcer, and everybody else wants them to be this goon squad. And it's very funny. So that's the whole premise of the movie, basically.
They got some beef. They have some big boys out there.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. I guess we go. Anything to say? Those are the only two guys who played actually in this last game. So there's no Likely.
Right.
Is Likely getting any further behind the rest of the tight ends in terms of where he is right now?
Potentially. I mean, he doesn't have the frame that the other two guys have. What he does have is better yards after the catch ability. And potentially better blocking, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, he definitely came through for the Ravens from a blocking perspective in Roman's offense last year. A lot of what he did was not necessarily in-line blocking, but it's good keeping your feet in level 2 blocking, which that's invaluable and always underrated. I think even seeing some of the Ravens do that in this game, and particularly one guy who did it was Devin Duvernay downfield, making some nice blocks in this game. I really want receivers who can still block, even if my offense is passing and predicated on yak. It still is critical.
100%. Duvernay made my notes for his downfield blocking 3 times in one game, which is pretty unusual. So I definitely had that on the Flowers touchdown. That was Duvernay sprung him.
Why don't you start us off in the wide receivers with Duvernay then, because he only played 2 series and he had 3 blocking notes. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the extent of his contribution, but I do think he has a role in this team as their best hands guy and just as a special teams guy and a blocking player.
Yeah. I had him on the last 2 plays of that first drive, which is probably where you've got 13 minutes and 12:30. He's got a note for each of them on a downfield play. And so the second one was the Flowers weaving through traffic for the touchdown, which Duvernay is, holding off a guy the entire time. So impressive.
Yeah. He's a pro at this point, 4th-year guy. He's a pro's pro. He fits the team. And I do think there are going to be snaps to go around on offense. The wide receiver can be somewhat of a rotational position, and that's before injuries, and it's a pretty injury-prone group. So I think he's going to have some decent run this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the other things, I hope will take a stride forward in terms of route running. One of the things I noticed in camp is that Keith Williams is a fantastic teacher of deceleration. And how you know this is you see him always getting into that sitting in the chair position where he kind of shortens up his leg motions and then he goes.
Film Study is brought to you by Factor. With the busy fall season just around the corner, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for those jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. Then get back to crushing your goals. Refresh your healthy habits without missing a beat. And with Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. We offset 100% of our delivery emissions, source 100% renewable electricity for our production sites and offices, and feature sustainably sourced seafood in all of our meals. This August, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door and ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use code Ravens50 to get that 50% off. That's code Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off.
I want you to go like this, and then he gets low, and he's teaching them how to decelerate and accelerate again so that they can basically make good breaks on their routes. And deceleration, absolutely critically underappreciated skill of wide receivers. Most guys have that, good top speed, at least pretty good acceleration if they're playing at this level now, but they don't always have the route running skills, which are really mostly based on deceleration, or one of the very key elements is deceleration. So that's what Williams tries to teach. And you see him, he's very technical about it. He really wants to see players do it right. And I hope that's somebody who Duvernay can make big strides with, because he's got the hands to be a very effective receiver. Doesn't really have the size to be one, but he has the hands and the speed to be very dangerous after the catch. So if he can improve his route running, improve his average separation by just a little bit to give a few more uncontested throws, he's going to do some real damage after the catch. I believe even more so in this offense than with Roman.
Agreed. Just on the topic of deceleration, the Bruce Feldman's college freaks list that was published last week on The Athletic, they actually have a column now for deceleration.
Really? That's great.
They're using GPS data, and they said maximum speed and then deceleration, how many, yards per second or whatever the measurement is. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Do they have any measurements on like Zay Flowers or anything in terms of that?
I didn't see it. This is the first year I noticed it. So this is all rising juniors and seniors coming up now. Okay. So it wasn't players from the last class, but the more, I thought it was interesting. More information.
I want that link from you. Please send that to me after the show.
Absolutely.
Here. But that sounds great. That is so cool. So Duvernay, no other real things. Let's talk about Zay Flowers a little bit. I'll let you start in terms of what you saw from him and just how excited you are.
Well, he broke that first tackle on Forbes. And Forbes is, despite his size, is a pretty good tackler, and just took that angle right away and got around the corner. And then he, had that weaving through traffic touchdown. I'm very excited about him. He is living up to the hype, and maybe more so, even listening to national syndicated podcasts. Almost everybody, Zay Flowers is on the top of their breakout rookie of the year watch list type of. You saw him at individual practices, at joint practices with the Commanders, just putting people in the coffin, putting them in the blender. No one can seem to stick him, and one-on-ones especially, but even in full squad. So I think, as I was alluded to earlier, he fixes the yards after the catch problem in two ways. One is by him catching the ball and creating them on his own, and second is by peeling the top off so that there's more room for the tight ends and running backs to operate. So I thought it was more of maybe a luxury pick at the time when he was drafted. I certainly liked the pick. I did have, I believe, one of the cornerbacks higher than him on my board. But now that we see him in action, the dimension that he brings, I don't think you can be very, very pleased.
Yeah, I'm definitely not upset about the pick at this point. I really, really wanted Forbes, and he went 16, and that was my profanity moment in terms of that draft. Were you on this year when we were having that discussion?
We did day two together this year.
Two.
We didn't do the first round.
So very good. So anyway, that was the biggest rush of profanity on that particular pick, because Forbes was a guy I really just absolutely loved in this draft. But anyway, he wasn't available, and then Banks is the guy that you liked ahead of. Yeah,
I like Banks. Yeah,
he's had a great preseason, by the way, with the Giants. I think he's had the most. There's a PFF stat, I think, or maybe it was some other statistical service, but he had the most coverage snaps without allowing a reception so far this year. So. Good. Obviously he's gonna have a pretty good career, it seems like, but no question, Zay Flowers changes the way opposing defensive coordinators need to scheme, and they're going to need to figure out what he's doing on a play-by-play basis, which means a lot more attention is going to him, which means a lot less attention is going to Andrews. Should make OBJ a better receiver, because OBJ is not going to be, I don't think. I mean, it's nice to have all the tools in the shed, so he could be a vertical receiver, but I don't see him as being used primarily in that way. I see him as mostly as a possession receiver, and this clears up space for that. You don't want a safety lurking behind potential level 2, level 3 throws, anticipating the overthrow and playing for interceptions. That's been a big bugaboo with the Jackson-Andrews connection these last couple of years.
Definitely, especially against Pittsburgh for some reason. Yeah, I think it's that final. He's that sixth gear in the Ferrari. That's what Flowers brings you to the offense.
All right, outstanding. Let's move on. Talk about Tylan Wallace. How about him? Because he's a guy right on the margin of the roster who I'm really excited about in terms of what he provided in this game. We've seen a couple back shoulder TDs, nice and well timed up, and they've both been Johnson throws, right? Am I missing that? No, one of them was Huntley.
I think it was
it?
Huntley. Huntley
Yeah.
week one, wasn't it? Yeah.
Even better.
Right. So
That
he has that connection with multiple different players. It's not just this is my one guy that I have chemistry with. Yeah, he's been extremely efficient, not targeted very often, and scoring a lot of touchdowns. So I'm very happy with him. This time last year he was competing to be wide receiver 2, and now he's wide receiver 6, and appears to be a better player this year than he was last year. So an indication of how far the wide receiver room has come.
So they probably have other options they would go to first. But one of the things I kind of like about Wallace is that he probably could play that X position if he had to. And now they'd probably, they go to a non-distinct set of receivers where they're not trying to create those individual matchups in the same way. They could go to Odell as an X, and he could do some of what you need him to do over there. But I think he's probably limited by some of his own speed at this point to using the entire route tree, which he certainly could do when he was younger. You have Bateman over there, but he'll be the starter, absolutely. But Aguilar might also be a guy that they would try to take advantage of what he brings to the table on that X side. But I think Wallace, it doesn't hurt to have a couple extra guys that you're cool with who can run a set of routes that will disadvantage single coverage on that X side and potentially force an overhang from the safety over there that is directed.
Absolutely. I think Aguilar would probably be the second man up, but that's just perception. I mean, haven't seen that or heard that anywhere. I think, think about the 2-minute drill coming into halftime. You're going to probably be rotating through guys, spiking the ball, putting a new set of receivers on the field, keeping them fresh. I've heard this argument or potential issue made amongst the Ravens flock. Well, you can't there's not enough touches there's not enough reps, or who can blame Duvernay for not being upset because they brought in 2 guys over top of him, or you need reps for the cornerbacks, so you can't bring in a veteran here. And I looked at it, and I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me here, but over the last 2 or 3 years, the 4th and 5th wide receiver / cornerback on either side of the ball between injuries and rotation sees about 10 to 15 to up to 20 snaps a game. That's the average for the 4th guy on the list, or the 5th guy. So anyway, point is, keep playing well, and you'll find some snaps on your way to the field.
Yeah, I hear the question. I would interpret the question maybe in a slightly different way, that Duvernay's saying, look, I was a number 2 receiver last year. It was me and Bateman to start the year, and I was your deep threat, and now you brought in 2 new guys. I guess I can understand that in some way, how he might be upset, but it isn't as good as his hands were. He needed to be a better route runner to be the guy who would make it easier for Andrews to catch balls, not just get some deep targets himself last year. And that he was not. So, hopefully, he'll take a step forward as a route runner, learn some of the tricks of managing his own deceleration to be exceptionally valuable to the team that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
It seems like it's sort of locked up now. I mean, I think Wallace has played well enough to just any of these, Tariq Black, Dante Demas, James Prochet, but potentially give him a run for that job. He seemingly kind of swatted them away at this point.
Maybe we talk about what you saw from any of the other guys, and we'll be fairly quick about this, and then we'll move into the offensive line here, which I do want to spend a little bit of time on. But who are your main practice squad guys from among the remainder? Because one thing we're really missing in camp this year is a true camp darling wide receiver, and I'm loving that fact that we're not hearing about.
We have Vokalek instead.
Yes, we have
Vokalek instead. I would say I think it's time to move on from Prochet. I think it's time to let him see if he can latch on as a possession slot receiver with a team that needs that kind of skill set more than the Ravens do with the tight ends that they have. So I would say Demas and Demas and Black. I think they would be the two guys that I would prioritize getting to the practice squad.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sean Ryan, a good game a week ago. I think Shamar Bridges has fallen off the back of the roster. One guy we haven't talked about because he didn't play this week is Laquan Treadwell, who is first-round pedigree going backwards, good special teams player. We've seen some of the veteran savvy in terms of what he brings you by the sideline at the end of the first half prior to the 60-yard field goal by Tucker. Is there any way that there's a spot for him on the team?
Not without injury, knock on wood. Hopefully he's a guy you can keep on the practice squad. It's nice to have the talent of a former first-rounder on the practice squad if you can do it.
I like that too, but I also like having guys who are in year one and rookies on the practice squad because you got value on the option still. I don't like having a bunch of 4th, 6th, 8-year guys on the practice squad when you're not going to retain them after this year anyway. So 4th year it may be exactly the wrong example, but let's say 5th, 6th, and 8th year guys. So that becomes clear. All right, let's move on to the offensive line. And we talked a little bit about the order of deployment and what that told us earlier in part 1. Again, please go back and download that if you haven't yet. One of the questions, obviously, coming into this was the play at left guard and how that would play out. I have scoring from that. Do you want to start with that, or would you like me to talk about your perceptions first, or how would you like to do it?
I'll just give you my perception on Simpson. I thought he was excellent. I thought you saw everything you wanted to see from him, pull blocks, anchoring in pass pro, getting to the second level. He was a rock solid. That was a rock solid game from Simpson.
Yeah, as I scored it. Now, this does not happen often. I would say the number of times this has happened with at least 31 blocks, I could probably count on one hand in 20 years. But he was 31 out of 31 on his blocks. So it's 0 missed blocks and no negative events. Okay.
Wow.
So, but 31 snaps is still a low number. Most of the games that I've scored over this period, I haven't scored preseason. So most of them have been regular season performances, which might have been 60 or 70 snaps. Obviously, that's a much harder to pitch a perfect game on.
Sure.
But this was a position starter ceiling performance. It's an A+ on this, 4 level 2 blocks. No pancakes, made his only pull, 2 nice highlight blocks that were each a little different. Obviously, that'll be in the offense article, and I'd encourage people to go to that. But you can't play any better than that than he did. And one thing you'll see is like scores for PFF that will not quite be as high as you would expect for me to say this is an A performance. Believe me, they're looking at the same thing, and they're saying basically he was perfect. What PFF does is if you don't have enough snaps, then the possibility of variance weighs on your score. So it's kind of like, what's the chance of a 400 hitter at the end of April versus the end of the season? There's a fair number of 400 hitters in the history of baseball at the end of April. There are very few at the end of a season, and that's why that variance component comes in.
Regressing back towards average, essentially.
Yes.
Got it.
So anyway, great game from Simpson. I think he's clearly locked it up, and I really would expect him to not play in the next game. So he'll sit the big 6 now, not the big 5. Mm-hmm. And we'll see some backup linemen really fighting for those last 3 or 4 spots on the roster.
Yes. Should we go to Salah?
Sure.
Stick at the same position. I thought you saw some good and some bad from him here. I had a note he got beat in pass protection in the middle of the second quarter. Seemed to do a better job as a run blocker in this game. He did reach the second level on that same drive. So I think he's a work in progress. He's not. You can tell he's not quite. He doesn't have his technique to where it needs to be at this point.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's not time. We're not giving up on Salah the prospect, but he's played 2 very poor preseason games so far. The first one I graded an F. This one also graded an F. 29 plays, 23 blocks, 3 missed, one penetration. So that was on a pull. And look, first time I watched the thing, I'm like, wow, he was in the backfield quickly. Well, Salah was a little bit too slow to get over there. And honestly, it was a difficult assignment to get there. And it was Jones, I think, who was the penetrator off the offensive right side, who came in and took down it wasn't Mitchell. I think it was Wright for a 5-yard loss. And it was down near the goal line. They scored on the Vokalek touchdown. Yeah. and that was unfortunate, but it's on him. He gave up one pressure. He gave up another that would have been a pressure, except that in my system, he got run out of the pressure because it became a run play. And that's really obviously something where a lot of people would say, just give him another -2 for that, and that would be appropriate. He gets a 0 in my system. He gave it the quarterback hit, was a -3. Big penalty in the first game, obviously, but in this game, 0.55 per play is well below the minimum standard for a passing grade at guard. So that's it's not acceptable. And this is going to be a year where Saleh is able to practice with the team, is able to hopefully learn his craft and develop his body as well. I don't think he has all the strength you would like to have in a player, and almost no rookie lineman does in terms of having both the size and the strength. They're still growing into their bodies. But I do want to maintain the thing that look who's playing for the Ravens in terms of their offensive linemen. Look who has played over the last few years. You graduate into a starting position. So when I have negative things to say about a first-year player, as I did some for Linderbaum last year, who had a lot of trouble pass blocking, and as I am having for Saleh this preseason, or as I have even for Falele last year and to a certain extent this year as well, all of those guys are capable of advancing their game from where they were as a first-year player. In the case of Linderbaum, it's a really great situation that he started the whole year and his run blocking was so good, and he's got something he still needs to work on, but there is expected improvement. And the Ravens have worked their magic on John Simpson to get a guy who had all these penalties to suddenly clean up his game a fair amount.
Yeah, that's what Joe D's specialty, it seems, last year. They led the league in least penalties on the offensive line. I'm bullish. I'm optimistic about Simpson. Was never really all that concerned about left guard, but I'm happy to see him. As far as Saleh, to be expected. A day 3 offensive guard is going to be a work in progress 9 times out of 10. It's just to be expected. Not he's not disappointing us, and he's not, surprising us in a positive way either. It's just part of the learning curve, as you said.
Yeah, I think the Ravens. I'll ask you, how do you think they played this in terms of the left guard battle from OTAs out to the present?
I loved it. I thought it was great. Give the young guys some first-team reps. Let him get his feet wet. Make Simpson earn it as a guy coming from a new team. And now you have everybody where they need to be, and you're better off for it. From a motivational standpoint, from a cutting your teeth standpoint, from everything.
I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and you've exactly hit on that, so I don't really need to add anything to it. But just said, oh, by the way, Harbaugh says at the podium, a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks now, that we're going to switch next week, and Simpson's going to get his chance to play with the ones. Like, oh well, yeah, we had planned that all along, and I think they really had. I think they really had decided that was the way it's going to go, and you want to be the second guy with the opportunity to clean up.
And they're not flip-flopping back and forth like they've gone previously too. Yeah. Right. So now you let them kind of, 5 fingers in a glove gel together.
Yeah. Good point. The line continuity should be very good in terms of this year and moving in. And I actually, the only thing that I would question whether or not he's the right guy for left guard, and there's no doubt he's the right guy among the current candidates. I mean, this is a done deal, is that Simpson might really be the right guy to back up at left tackle. And the reason I think that's a possibility is because his size and arm length fit the position. And if you look at his body type, he's much more of a top to bottom, even athletic build than a big, massive guard build with a lot of sand in the pants. He's actually a fairly low sand in the pants guy. So I don't know that they've ever really looked at him as a tackle, but it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't shock me if he's a guy that they consider for left tackle if things really start to unravel during the season.
From my recollection, he was pure guard at Clemson, but yeah, it could be. Honestly, I think if you pay McCary $6 million a year, I know he doesn't have the arm length, but I think he makes up with it with some of his footwork. I think you have to make him that guy. If not, why are you paying him so much?
He's certainly the first guy out, Fossey. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think they're going to try him. I think if it went really poorly with McCary, which it hasn't been great all his time at Pack, he's been a maybe a slightly above replacement level backup, to be fair. But if he can give you that. That's actually pretty good. That's actually hard to find at left tackle. But on the other hand, if it unraveled further, and he was no longer that guy, he was a sub replacement level guy or an at replacement level guy, then I think you have to look at your options and say, how do we improve this?
Yeah. So Falele would also presumably be in that mix, considering he's taken a lot of snaps there. I saw some good and some bad from him this game. He jumped on the 2-point attempt. They credit it to him at least. I thought it might have been Salah, but I don't know. Anyway, how did he score?
I didn't actually score him. I scored him in the first
okay.
week, and actually the first week I thought he looked better than he did in this game. And I've got my notes in terms of when he had mistakes on the field, failing to maintain a block, too slow to block on an RR0, which was not good. That was a third down play that they lost it.
Was that the punt, the first half punt?
Yes, the first half punt, right before that.
So Emmanuel Forbes sort of evaded Falele and brought down Gordon. I thought Gordon, first watch, I thought, wow, Falele's got to make that block. And then on second watch,
Gordon
I said,
took the wrong angle.
He should have cut back. He had a cutback lane there.
Yeah. But, I agree. It was Gordon more than Falele, but both of those were kind of tough zeros to assign. And in fact, it was a 0 for him. It was a -2 for Salah on the block by the goal line that went for -5. The Redskins, Commanders, I have to swear jar again. The Commanders were on it both times in terms of wanting to get in the backfield and run blitz on those plays. It's very difficult to stop that with a pulling guard. So, it kind of is what it is. And they did a good job. You need to have a set of plays that threatens that edge defender in a way that says, hold on, I better wait, rather than rush in there in order to combat that. And the Ravens have had that in past years with the read option, but they really don't have it in the bag of tricks right now. So
right.
All right. So what else? Other offensive linemen. So you mentioned Falele at left tackle. So I don't think he's better than the fourth option probably at left tackle right now. I think they might go to Sharp third. Okay. At some point, depending on how bad things are, maybe Sharp gets claimed. You don't probably want to break up the continuity by moving Simpson, but I think he's a possibility. I don't think Ben Cleveland is a possibility at left tackle, but I think he's a possibility at right tackle. And I think also that they haven't, they've never shown any indication that they would want to move Moses from right to left.
Right.
So I think they really are thin in terms of left tackle backup options.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest skill sets in the league. Not a whole lot of teams go deep, can survive even one injury. I do think it's somewhat encouraging that you do have a few options here that maybe you didn't have quite as many in years past.
Sometimes you manufacture options for yourself because you're out of options. So it's kind of like the Ravens' third and fourth and fifth and sixth cornerbacks right now is you're out of options. So we're going to manufacture some.
Right.
All right. Anybody else we want to talk about on the offensive line?
I think let's touch on Mustipher because I'm really struggling to project that is he going to be that last spot. But if there is only 9 and it's Cleveland versus Mustipher, assuming Salah's going to be not in that competition, is it more beneficial to have a dedicated center now he has 40 starts on his resume, so he's experienced. And I thought he was okay this game, not great. He did get knocked back or stonewalled a couple times on run plays, and there was a couple plays where there was some pressure, and I wasn't quite sure if that was on him or somebody else. But it being the center, you would hope that he's kind of navigating that. Anyway, I guess the question is, with Cleveland, does Cleveland give you enough versatility as a potentially 3-position player versus the benefit of having a dedicated center?
Left guard, right tackle for Cleveland. Obviously, you're not projecting Cleveland as a center, so you would have to get somebody else if Mustipher gets signed by someone else, because he's a beyond the 5th year, so he'd be a guy who would have to get signed away from you. Conceivably, I think I actually thought Mustafa played real well in this game, and
Okay.
and effective blocking. He gives the Ravens an unbelievably imposing offensive line in terms of size when he's out there. Even though Linderbaum's bigger this year as well, I don't want to put that down in any way, but I think if you want a quality backup at center, he could be it. One thing I didn't really take the time to do is go back and look at his individual snaps in this game, and that's something in a long game like this. Is the shotgun snap showing up at a usual, more or less straight line trajectory directly in the mid-season section, or is he having to go down to his knees to pick up the ball occasionally to find the football? And that would be a consideration. I'm sure they have good analytics on that, where they're kind of keeping a hits per at bat on or maybe a fielding percentage is the better definition there of trying to get very close to 1,000 in terms of how many mistakes he's making. But that would be a consideration. One of the things the Ravens are very adept at is looking around at the rest of the league and their current set of injuries and saying, yeah, we can get away with having this guy on the roster for 2 weeks on the practice squad. We can bring him back at that point and be our backup center. They could save some money if they did that by having him, obviously on a effectively a week-to-week contract if you come back. Another possibility is they use IR to get one of these linemen, not necessarily Mustafa, onto IR where
Salah.
he becomes. Could be Salah. Yeah. Could be Faalele. Could be either of those guys, but they're going to want to keep Faalele because he's a size and shape guy that they will lose. Salah, I would think the same thing, even though he's a 6th-round pick. Somebody's going to find value in his size and shape at 6'6", 325.
And Cleveland.
And that's 3 effectively size and shape guys they want to try and keep. And to do so, they might need 10 spots if you have Mustafa and McCary as backups.
Yeah. So I guess the other way would be Mitchell's shoulder injury is nagging him. He gets the stash, and then you keep 10.
Yeah, and that's a really effective short-term stash. Of course, you might really want Mitchell on the team. He's a guy who will see playing time for sure. So it'd almost be better to have an offensive lineman be the guy. If you really want to pick your offensive lineman, who would be the guy? It'd be either Cleveland or Faalele is the guy you'd want to be the stasheroo.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Agreed.
Okay. All right. Outstanding. So I've got one more thing. Picking some MVPs. Did you pick 3?
I sure did.
Let's do it. Your number 3 guy.
My number 3 guy is Justice Hill. Again, for the 3rd time, I thought he made 3 good plays on all 3 opportunities and carried the offense down the field on that first drive. Can't ask for anything more than that.
Very deserving, absolutely. And I had him on my honorable mention list, but I had 3 guys I like better. And I start with my number 3, who's Zay Flowers. We saw the show we hoped to see from Zay Flowers in terms of his unbelievable ability after the catch in this game. So also some good ability to get free, but basically ability after the catch being the primary thing we saw here, and very impressed by it. And he got to play against A-level talent with Malcolm Forbes on that offensive right side.
Completely agree. He was my number 2.
Okay, so I guess we jump to my number 2 since we've talked about yours. My number 2 is John Simpson. Very rare we see an A+ value like that, and it really was a question for me whether he was 2 or 1, not whether he was on the list or not. So easy call for that. By the way, Simpson been the number 2 MVP in both these games so far. So
he's my number 1 MVP in this game. So
really, very good,
very impressed. I mean, he played deep into the game, and as you said, he had a perfect game. So it's hard to get much better than that.
I'm impressed that you've got him there. That's very good. And then I had Johnson as the number 1. I thought basically he had a nearly perfect game in terms of driving the offense. The only downside obviously was the ball that got through Prosay's midsection somehow and fell into the hands of the defender, which was very unfortunate. But anyway, I don't really blame on Johnson, who I thought had an outstanding game and gave his receivers a chance to make plays with the ball after they got it.
Definitely. He's my honorable mention along with the 2 tight ends.
Okay. Always a pleasure to talk football with you, Voss. We have so much fun doing this. We always go a little bit longer than expected, and even though I appreciate how terse you are with your delivery and whatnot, you're very to the point. We still go down a few rabbit holes as we do that, and I appreciate you indulging me in that. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
I am at Twitter at Vasilis Beatdown, Vasilis Beatdown. I am the co-managing editor and writer for the Baltimore Beatdown blog, part of SB Nation. And I have a new podcast every Thursday night with Yuri, live streaming at 9 o'clock on Thursdays, called The Ravens Way.
All right. Outstanding. Also, I want you to look for Voss and my joint project this year, which will be Thursday morning GM. So Monday morning quarterback, you get it how it goes. But Thursday morning GM. But this will be a show that comes out on Thursday. It might actually come out on Friday, but probably Thursday, that will go through what are the concerns at a general manager level for the Ravens as of every Thursday during the regular season. So this is going to be an ongoing thing. Voss and I have slightly different views on franchise building, but very complementary, I think, in terms of understanding the need to save money. Voss just wants to spend it somewhere else than I do, or in an irregular pattern that I'll let you explain to him on the show. Right. Anyway.
No, I'm looking forward to it, Ken. Especially now you're coming into, you have your franchise quarterback, and the economics of this keeping this team to be a contender have never been more important as they are right now.
Very challenging, and the 2000 and 2001 Ravens had similar challenges. The 2013 Ravens had similar challenges. And neither of those two teams was able to maintain, a dynasty after the 2001 teams were great, but then they fell off until they rebuilt that defense. It's going to be quite a challenge. I'm looking forward to it too, and I'm sure we'll have some animated discussions about how that's going as the season progresses. Other folks out there, if you'd like to do a film study short, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. They're always open. I'd love to hear from you. Kernel of an idea, again. Please, if you try to rewrite the evolution of the game of football or anything about every element of franchise building, we're going to break that down into a smaller part. So try not to paint the Mona Lisa or paint the Sistine Chapel, and we'll try and pick a kernel of an idea that we can talk about for about 15 to 30 minutes. Love to hear from you. Always love to meet new people, and this is where I find new people who can do other shows with me. So this is really the pipeline that I'm looking for. So I want to meet you. I want to hear from you. Please give me a call. And Voss, thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.